In this lesson, we'll neutralize a color cast in an unbalanced image using both curves and wheels in preparation for grading. I'll press Option or Alt F so we can see our clips. Select the next clip, Niagara Falls. We can see that it's not graded because of the gray outline. And Option or Alt F again to return to the enhanced viewer. Before we look at color balance, let's do a quick tonal adjustment on this image using the curves. We have the luminance curve unganged from RGB. Notice how both the waveform and the histogram overlay both indicate that there aren't any very bright pixels or very dark pixels in this image. So employing the same approach as before, we can drag the bottom point along the floor to darken the shadows, and drag the top point along the ceiling to brighten the highlights. And then perhaps look at adding a gentle S-curve to increase the contrast. Now, after adjusting the tonal range and contrast of an image, you can begin to carefully examine the colors in the image and neutralize them in preparation for grading. We do this because an unbalanced image will affect the precision of your grade, the quality of any keyed elements, and will stand out in a sequence of balanced clips. In the settings for the waveform monitor, I'll select Colorize, so we see the separate red, green, and blue color channels. In the neutral areas of a properly balanced image, these different color channels will align and the traces will be white in both the waveform and the histogram. In this case, we can see that there's much more blue throughout the highlights in the image, and we can tell there's an overall blue color cast by looking at the clip itself. It doesn't really matter which color channel you choose in order to start this alignment process. I'll start by selecting the green curve and then drag in the ceiling to align the green and blue traces in the scope. Then I'll select the red curve and do the same thing. My traces are mostly white over in this area, but still spread out a little bit in the midtones. To bring those reds up, I'll add a control point somewhere in the middle of the red curve using the Shift key to make sure I don't adjust the curve, and then pull up just a little bit. I see a little bit of extra red in the highlights here, so I'll try bringing that back down a little bit. And then maybe I'll try to bring this blue area up a little bit. That's about 3/4 of the way up the waveform. So on the blue curve, I'll add a control point about 3/4 of the way up and pull down just a little bit. And then maybe down a little bit below that. I'm trying to overlap the traces in both the waveform and the histogram as much as possible. They turn white in the waveform. They don't really turn white in the histogram because they're slightly shifted off of each other, but as long as they stack up roughly the same, I know I'm getting very close. Let's toggle that correction with Command or Control D. And we can see that by using separate red, green, and blue color channel curves, we've been able to align the traces to make them white in the waveform and remove the color cast from the image. Let's see how we can color balance this image using the color wheels instead of the curves. First, I'll reset my custom curves correction by clicking this button here. Then, for my scopes, instead of the waveform, I'm going to switch to the RGB parade. Instead of overlapping the red, green, and blue color channels, the parade scope breaks out each color channel and shows the brightness range of that color channel independently. But we can see the same predominance of blue in this scope. Before we adjust color balance, let's start with tonal range. So in the color wheels, I'll drag down in the master wheel for lift until the traces touch 0. I'll drag up or to the right in the master wheel for gain to spread out the distribution of values. And I'll try moving gamma in either direction just to see what looks good. Maybe about there. And I'll adjust overall contrast in the adjustment bar. Now to neutralize this color cast, I want to bring all of these blue traces down to line up better with the greens and raise the red slightly as well. So in the color wheels palette, I'll use the center control of the offset color wheel, and I'll start by dragging left away from blue to bring the blue traces down. Then I'll drag up slightly to raise the reds. Looking for an optimal mix across the distribution of luminance values so that the luminance values of each of the red, green, and blue color channels are more equally distributed. I also need a little bit more red and blue in the shadows. So in the lift control, I'll drag down and slightly to the left. In general, when adjusting hue in color wheels, you move these center controls very little. Now that I've achieved decent color balance, I can go ahead and readjust my overall tonal range, perhaps bringing up the gain a little bit and adjusting the gamma. So you can see you can use color wheels or curves to color balance an image. Which you use is dependent mostly upon personal taste and which tools you're more comfortable with. But I find that you have more overall control by using the curves. If your clip includes one of the industry standard color charts, like this shot here, you can use the color match feature to create a starting grade. This clip clearly has a blue cast. Let's select the color match palette, and in this pop-up menu, we can select the color chart that was used in the shot. This one happens to be the X-Rite color checker for video. And we can see the pattern here matches the pattern here. To apply it, I'll select the color chart tool and drag it to get it roughly in the right place. Then I can zoom in. I'm using the center wheel on my mouse and reposition, and I'm clicking on the center wheel on my mouse and zooming in a little tighter. If you can't middle click with your mouse, hold down Shift and scroll to pan horizontally, or hold down Option and scroll to pan vertically. And I want to position this pretty precisely and also be on a frame where her fingers are not covering any of the color chips. My goal is to make sure each sampler here is fully inside each of the color chips. I'll press Shift and the Z key to fit back to the window. Then I need to check that my source and target gammas are set correctly.
In Resolve 18, these settings now default to automatic, which will usually produce the correct result.
If this were a log encoded clip, I could choose the correct log format here. I know this is a Rec 709 clip, so I'll leave it at Rec 709. My target gamma is Rec 709, as is my target color space. I don't know the color temperature of the seam, so I'll leave this at the default. And I'll click Match.
And immediately the image is much more balanced. But we can see in both the waveform and especially in the histogram that our red levels are still a little bit too low, and we've got a little too much blue in the upper midtones. So let's try to address those. Again, these color channel luminosity values in both the histogram and the RGB parade should align closely with each other only for neutral areas of an image.
Looking at the waveform, I like the overall distribution of the green channel the most, so I'll use that as my reference. Starting here and then moving over to the histogram, I want to kind of keep these green peaks where they are and move the red and blue to see if I can line them up a little bit better. So with my red channel selected, and these are in the midtone, I don't really want to mess too much with the highlights. I could try to pull those up maybe a little bit. I probably want to leave those pretty close. I'm just going to try to push those over to the right to line those up a little bit better. And then the blue and the green I want to bring closer together. Remember, I want to keep the green pretty much where it is, so I'll pull that blue down a little bit. I'll select blue, and toward the upper part of that curve, I'll add a control point and move that to try to get those to line up. And I'm still a little bit off here, and I can try to move those a little closer and see if I can split the difference between those two. And that gets us a lot closer. I'll put a little bit more blue in the highlights. And let's toggle that correction on and off with Command or Control D. If the DP had the foresight to shoot with a color chart, it can greatly simplify the process of normalizing a shot.
Finally, I'm going to expand the dynamic range back out by adjusting the gain.
In the next lesson, we'll learn how to use the log wheels.